And last week we were in on anger and what anger is and what anger does, anger and strife. And this week we'll look at dealing with anger and strife. What should be our response to it? And some ways to identify it right here in James chapter 3. As we looked at last week, sometimes we like to excuse anger and strife. And the people in these churches had a tendency to do that as well. And so James, as their former pastor, as they were thrust out of Jerusalem, if you read the first part of James chapter 1, verse 1, the 12 tribes which were scattered abroad. But as they were in these churches, they had a tendency to be involved in anger and strife, as we all do. And this is a constant battle, and it is something that is a lifelong pursuit. So let us not ever think that we've arrived on this, but it is something that we can do better on, and we can say, oh, well, we're doing better this year than last year, or I'm doing better this decade than I did last decade, and pray, Lord, help me to be better in the next decade. But we look at verse 13. Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? So usually when we have anger and strife, it's because somebody thinks that they're wiser than somebody else, right? They think that they have the knowledge that somebody else doesn't have. Who else is endued with knowledge? They think that their way is the right way, or that they were wronged and therefore they need to get back at the person, whatever it is. And everybody likes to take the point of I'm the injured one, or I am the right one. I'm the one who is on the bully pulpit, and that's what it becomes, is the bully pulpit. And so we have to be careful about that, because we want to pursue our own agenda. And oftentimes it's a selfish agenda. And what he says here, who is a wise man endued with knowledge among you? So who is the person who really is the wise one? Who's the really one who has a lot of spiritual knowledge? Who is the spiritual one among you? Who is the one who really has the right way? Who's the wise man? Is it the person who knows how to make how to get things done quickest? Is it the person who knows how to get the most people in a room? Is it the person who knows how to make the most money? Is it the person who knows how to make it sound the best? What is true wisdom? Who is the wise man and endued with knowledge among you? And here's the answer. Don't worry about what he's saying and his knowledge and wisdom. First observe his life. Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. So don't focus so much on his words, focus on his works. Is he living a life that backs up what he's saying? Is he living a life of faithfulness to the Lord? Does he have a good conversation, a positive, good lifestyle? Agathos, there, good. Is it something that just is good? I can look at his life, I can look at his personality, I can look at his behavior, his lifestyle, and I can just say, yeah, he does good things, or she does good things. They do good things, that person does good things, and also, we want to see their works, notice it, with meekness of wisdom. Meekness of wisdom means they have that attitude under control. They have that personality under control, that strength. And maybe they're right, maybe they're not right, but they've got that under control. Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. And he says in verse 14, but if ye have bitter envying and strife, there's that word strife. If ye have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. What does he say, glory not? Well, don't say you're the wise man. Don't say you're the one who's endued with knowledge. Don't have that attitude. And he says also, glory not, and notice what he says, lie not against the truth. Well, the truth is the person who has that bad attitude, the person who has that I'm always right mentality, the person who thinks they're wise isn't really. Lie not against the truth. We really deceived ourselves when we get like that, as he says in chapter 1 of this book. But he says, verse 15, this wisdom, so it is wisdom. See, we need to be careful when we throw out that wisdom word. What wisdom do we mean? Do we mean this is the best way, humanly speaking, or do we mean God's wisdom as is subjected in submission to the Word of God and to the will of God, submission to the Spirit of God? So it is wisdom, but God says this wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. Say, wow, those are some stark terms. Yes, they are. Earthly, sensual, and devilish. God said they're from the earth. They're focused on what's going on here. They're not focused on what's going on there. So it might be wisdom, but it's worldly wisdom. It's focused on only the workings of things on this earth. It might work out in the most utilitarian and pragmatic way on this earth, but it's not true wisdom. It's not godly wisdom. It's not been submitted to the will of God, to the Word of God, to the fear of God, to the Spirit of God. So it might be wisdom, but it's earthly. Then it's also sensual. That is, it's based on the senses. It's based on my flesh. And so the pursuit of it is something that is not spiritual, but sensual. It's not something that deals in spiritual fruit, but it's something that deals with physical advancement. Physical advancement. And then he says also, it is devilish. It is earthly, sensual, and this is the ultimate form of it, is devilish. Because the devil he's the author of what word? Confusion, right? He's the author of confusion. And where we have, the scripture says this in verse 16, where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. So you notice how he connects those words devilish and confusing, just as Paul does, speaking of the confusion that Satan works. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But he says in verse 17, now let's look at the flip side of that. But the wisdom that is from above. Okay, this is true wisdom. This is godly wisdom. And this godly wisdom does not always work to the common sense of mankind or to the seeming practical wisdom of mankind. The wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. First, we have its mode. The wisdom that is from above is first pure. It is ceremonially and ethically pure. It's an ethically moral thing. It's done right ethically and ceremonial. It's holy. The mode of it, the wisdom that is from above, is first pure, and then it is peaceable. That is, its true motivation is to make peace. If we use our wisdom only to get our own way, then that's not wisdom from above. The wisdom from above has peace at its true motivation, not as its stated motivation, but at its true motivation. Notice also it's gentle. Its manner is not hard. It's not vindictive. It's not trying to be hurtful to people. True wisdom's manner is gentle. And it's also easy to be entreated. That means compliant or obedient or willing to be persuaded. When there's somebody who is what we would say stubborn or will not be persuaded, then they're not looking to be persuaded. They're looking to be antagonistic. You ever met someone like that? They're looking for a fight. They're not looking to be persuaded. They don't want you to be able to provide an answer. I've had many people come and bring charges against me, and you have too probably in your life, whether work or in your family, where they've said such and such and such and such and such and such, and you realize in that moment, you know what, it doesn't matter what I say. They're looking to have aught with me right now. And there's not much you can do with them. They're not easy to be entreated. They're not willing to be persuaded. By the way, you can hold your place there and turn to Proverbs 22. Because we find the people who are not easy to be entreated are those, again, involved in strife. And they're not humble people. They're rebellious people. Look at chapter 22 and verse 10. No, that's not the right passage. It is. 22:10, yes, 22:10. Cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. See, if there's a situation where if we just got rid of this one person, or they just got rid of this one attitude, and there's 70 other attitudes there, everybody's at peace. Notice what he says, cast out the scorner, and contention shall go out. Yea, strife and reproach shall cease. Because the scorner, the one has that rebel heart, is going to keep on causing trouble. They're going to keep on with strife. It's not going to stop. It's going to be something else tomorrow, as we saw last week. And then chapter 19, verse 19, is similar to it. A man of great wrath shall suffer punishment. You're not going to keep him away from suffering that punishment, and you're also not going to keep away from dealing with him. For if thou deliver him, yet thou must do it again. We might get past it this day, but tomorrow, husband or wife, it's going to be another thing. Or tomorrow, church member, it's going to be another thing. Or tomorrow, coworker, it's going to be another thing. Or family member, it's going to be another thing. if they have that attitude to seek strife, if they have that strifeful or heart of anger and strife, and he says, if thou deliver him, yet thou must do it again. You're going to deal with it again. And this is the way it is. We come back to James there. He says, easy to be entreated, but then also we have, that's the method, but then also we have the meat. The meat of true wisdom is twofold. Notice he says there, it is full of mercy and good fruits. That's what it's full of. And what it is lacking, what it is without, is partiality and hypocrisy. Mercy and good fruits. Mercy and good fruits, a heart of compassion, a heart of recognizing the needs of others, a heart that has good fruit. It yields good fruit. And then that's the fullness of it. But the lacking of it is without partiality and without hypocrisy. Partiality is that idea of equal treatment, unequal treatment of people and of situations. So you might recognize this at work. I've recognized it in churches over the years. If so-and-so, some person that somebody else likes in the business or in the church or in the family or in society for that matter, we see it in government. If they do something, it's fine. But if somebody else does it, why, then it's terrible. Have you ever noticed that in politics? You see this all the time. If Biden does it, it's terrible. But if Trump were to do the same thing, a lot of people would be like, oh, it's great. Why? Because they have a bias, a tribalist mentality is what I'm looking for, to just worship that. And that's not true wisdom. Okay, I'm not saying that. I hope you understand that I don't hold Biden very high esteem. Okay, all right. Okay, let's move on. All right. Without partiality, though, and you see it in family. You know, the one sibling does it, it's fine. The other sibling does it while World War III is about to break out. In the church, if one person introduces something new, it's fine. But if that other person were to introduce the same exact thing, there would be a problem because of people's attitudes. This is the way it is. So without partiality, and then also he says without hypocrisy. Hypocrisy, again, is representing yourself as something that you're not. And sometimes we do that by saying we want this. What I really want is this path forward. What I really want is this over here. And people begin to discern after a certain amount of time, no, that's not really what you want because what you're doing doesn't accomplish that. So we have this attitude of being disingenuous with one another if we get in this worldly wisdom mindset, this worldly knowledge mindset back from verse 13. We have to be careful that we have an accurate representation of our motives and of our goals, that we're not disingenuous, because then we're being deceitful, and that the Lord hates that. Go back to Proverbs now, if you would. Proverbs 30. And again, verse 33, which we looked at last week. Surely the churning of milk bringeth forth butter, and the wringing of the nose bringeth forth blood. So the forcing of wrath bringeth forth strife. So wrath and strife go together. If you crack an egg, you're going to get egg that pours out of it. And that's exactly what anger and strife deal in. So one is, you don't have one without the other. And this is what he's talking about back in the book of James, where he says without hypocrisy. So some people will engage in activity that is full of strife, full of anger, or full of strife, and they'll say, well, I didn't want it to be an angry situation. Or they'll be full of anger and then say, well, I didn't want to bring strife. I was trying to do this. And you took it the wrong way. No, if you wring the nose, it bleeds. Remember the same word in all those places. If you churn the milk, it turns into butter. If you force wrath, it bringeth forth strife. That's the way it is every time. And so we can't say my purpose in being angry or involved in strife is not to cause anger and strife. That doesn't work that way. Let's be careful with that. But let's notice some verses and a couple points for us regarding dealing with strife as we've now identified it. Number one, a wise person attempts to diffuse anger and strife. He attempts to diffuse anger and strife. Back in chapter 15 of Proverbs 15, he says in verse 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. So we want to defuse anger. We want to defuse the situation, not make it worse. But if we use grievous words that are attacking, words that are assaulting. Grievous words, they stir up anger. They make more. But a soft answer turneth away wrath. So speak softly with one another, and let's use words that are a little bit softer or without the hard edges as we can. Attempt to do that in the will of God and under the control of the Spirit of God. Proverbs chapter 26. Proverbs 26 and verse 20. Where no wood is, there the fire goeth out. So where there is no talebearer, the strife ceaseth. So where there's not somebody who's whispering or somebody who is a talebearer talking to everybody else, the strife ceaseth. And we don't have any more of it. It goes away. We need to defuse that anger and strife. Verse 21, as coals are to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. He's always close by to kindle strife. The contentious man always wants to keep that going. And so where a situation could have died, he goes around and he tries to keep that thing going. He tries to stoke the fire a little bit. No, I'm still mad. No, you should be mad too. And this, that, and the other thing. A wise person defuses anger and strife. He doesn't bring those grievous words. He doesn't bring those attacking words. He doesn't make those personal attacks in a situation where his logic didn't win the day. He feels like he always has to have the last word. But God's people should rip out the fuse out of that bomb if possible. If possible, you see the trail of gunpowder going to blow up the keg, you should go kick an interruption in that so that we don't have an explosion. Do our best to try to keep the explosion from happening. A wise person, spiritually wise person, tries to defuse anger and strife. Number 2, a wise person defers anger and strife. Chapter 21, Proverbs 21 and verse 14. And I think it's the wrong chapter, because I don't see it. Well, we'll skip that one, because there's a whole lot of others. But there is one there somewhere. Okay, you'll have to trust me on that, I guess. Oh, chapter 19. Chapter 19, verse 1. Better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Now, this is not the verse I had either. I'm wondering if I, by dyslexia of some kind, switched out numbers. I must have. Let's try chapter 17, verse 14. The beginning of strife is as one when one letteth out water, therefore leave off contention before it be meddled with. So a wise person defers anger and strife. He gets away from it. The beginning of strife is as when one letteth out water. So you turn on the water, but the more you turn it on, now it's just gushing out. So leave off contention, leave it off. Turn it off before it be meddled with. So he defers anger and strife. Chapter 15, verse 18. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. In other words, he brings peace where there is strife. And then chapter 14, verse 29. He that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. So a wise person defers anger and strife. Don't be hasty to anger and to strife. Ecclesiastes, if you want to look over there, Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So don't be hasty to be spirit. A wise person, spiritually a wise person, defers anger and strife. So if we can defuse anger and strife in some way, then we ought to. If we can defer anger and strife, maybe let it go for a while or let it go forever. If we can get past anger and strife, defer it, it will be a blessing. And then number 3, a wise person disciplines his spirit regarding anger and strife. Chapter 12, Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 16. It says, a fool's wrath is presently known, but a prudent man covereth shame. He's disciplined. He's able to cover that shame that would be presented by not allowing his anger to be known or put out there. He's got self-control in his spirit. Chapter 14, verse 29, he that is slow to wrath is of great understanding, but he that is hasty of spirit exalteth folly. Some of these verses, again, apply to all of these points. But verse 32 of chapter 16, he that is slow to anger, notice this, is better than the mighty. He that is slow to anger is better than the mighty. Why? Because we try with our anger to control one another, don't we? I want to get my agenda through, so if I get a little bit angry or I stir up enough other people to anger about this situation, then I'll get my agenda through. And God says, no, if you want true strength, then be slow to anger. And he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh the city. It's a hard thing to rule your spirit when something's happening the way you don't want it to, isn't it? I know that. It's hard for me to do that. It's hard for you to do that. Ruling your spirit is a difficult thing. Having that discipline regarding your spirit, in your spirit regarding anger and strife. Chapter 18, verse 6. A fool's lips enter into contention, and his mouth calleth for strokes. So we want to have discipline so that we don't have those strokes. We need the discipline. We don't want to be entering into contention. That means we're not wise. That means we're foolish. That means we're not disciplined in our speech. It means we're just loose. A fool's mouth is his destruction, verse 7. All right, chapter 20, verse 3. It is an honor for a man to cease from strife, but every fool will be meddling. It is an honor for a man to cease from strife. He has self-control. He can pass over the transgression, as we've seen in other passages. Chapter 25, Proverbs 25, and verse 8. He says here, go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. And then also verse 28. He that maketh no rule over his spirit, he that hath no rule over his spirit, is like a city that is broken down and without walls. When people cannot control themselves, they don't have that discipline, that self-control, that control of the Spirit of God in their lives. And sometimes we do this when we just inflate trouble. We inflate things and make a decision seem worse than it is. We do that for our own selves. We do that when we're trying to convince other people. And we try to make that thing that other person did the most terrible thing that has ever occurred, when really it wasn't that big of a deal. I was in the grocery store the other day, and you see somebody do something, and then somebody else looks over, and they want to talk about it with somebody who wasn't even connected, and say, can you believe that they did that? Can you believe it? And they want to be mad about it. Well, just move on. You've made a mountain out of a molehill. Something that was small, something that you could have passed over. You're trying to make a big deal about it. You have a contentious spirit. You've got that critical spirit to identify every problem of everybody else and then magnify those things so that they're greater than they really are. And you're going to have difficulty and trouble in your life. Now, a wise person disciplines his spirit regarding anger and strife. And we can go back to Proverbs chapter 3 on that. And verse 30, he says this, strive not with a man without cause if he have done thee no harm. So the people that try to make a big deal out of something that isn't, they'll try to make a personal offense out of something that has really nothing to do with them. That's something that didn't affect them, they'll try to make a bigger deal out of. They strive without cause. They've not really been injured, they've not really been hurt, they're not going to be really affected by that decision, but my, aren't they upset about somebody else doing it? Strive not with a man without cause if he have done thee no harm. A wise person disciplines his spirit regarding anger and strife. And then lastly, a wise person disassociates from anger and strife. And this might be one of the best things that we can do, certainly for ourselves it is, but also from other people. A wise person disassociates from anger and strife. Now, you can't always distance yourself and disassociate from anger and strife. Sometimes it's somebody that you have to work with. Sometimes it's somebody else who's at church. Sometimes it's your spouse, your husband, or your wife. And you can't disassociate from them because they have an angry spirit. So what should you do? You're married to them. It might be difficult. You might have a husband and you might be able to call him Nabal like Abigail did. He might be a son of Belial. He might be rude and crude and angry and mean. But you have to stay with him. He might be like the men in 1 Peter chapter 3 where they obey not the word. So what do you have to do? How can you behave to try to bring peace to the situation? Or you might have a wife who is full of contention. Proverbs speaks about those type of women. Proverbs 21, verse 9. It is better to dwell on the corner of the housetop, to be by yourself, to be distanced, than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Not a fun thing when you have a woman who is out of control, does not control her spirit, and is full of anger and strife. Verse 19, it is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman. I'd like to get out of the house and go sit under a tree for a while just to get away from this contentious woman. Or chapter 25, verse 24, it is better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman and in a wide house. So a wise person disassociates and distances himself or herself from anger and strife, except when he can't. So when you can't, what should you do? You got a person who always wants to bring up the negative thing. They want to stir up anger and strife. There's a bunch of people that are mad over here about this thing, saying, or trying to get people to be upset. Can you believe what they did? Or they're trying to do this, and let's all be mad about it. What should we do? Well, what about with your wife or your husband when they're just angry and they're complaining about everything? They say, so-and-so did such and such to me at work or whatever. You might say this. You might say, maybe they meant it that way, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't really mean it that way. And you might, by that, help your husband or your wife or your fellow member at church or your coworker calm down. Maybe they didn't mean it that way. And probably if they're angry, they'll say, no, they did. I know they did. Well, you don't know that, you know. Or you could say, you know, maybe there's a bigger context surrounding what they said or what they didn't say or what they did or what they didn't do. Maybe they were a little bit short with you because all day long they were dealing with such and such a thing, and your comment was the last straw. And that will help you understand, now we're bringing peace to the situation. Not that they're right always in what they did or what they said, but maybe you can bring peace to the situation. Or maybe their mind was preoccupied and you asked them a question, they responded short, and it was just because you caught them off guard. They weren't even mad at all. And they didn't mean to be mad. You could say these things to your husband or your wife to try to help them calm down and get some perspective about what's going on. And then you can encourage them to focus on the positives of that situation or of that person, or of that circumstance, whatever's going on. Say, you know, they want to complain about the, about the cold weather, or about the rain, or about the heat. And you could say, well, the good thing about it is I got my vitamin D today, you know, or I needed to sweat off some things anyway. You know, when we make take the energy out of that negativity, we can really start to bring peace. Doesn't always work, but it's a good thing to try to do with your husband or your wife. In any case, don't get sucked into it yourself. And the same is true with coworkers and with fellow church members. Just don't get sucked into it with yourself. Proverbs 20, verse 3. He says here, it is an honor for a man to cease from strife. You can be honorable in that situation. Proverbs 6. And verse 16, these 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are abomination to him. What's one of the things he says there in verse 19? He that soweth discord among the brethren. God hates that. He does not look kindly on that. He hates it. So we need to disassociate from that as much as is humanly possible. Just say, I don't want to be involved in that. You can be upset if you want to. I don't want to be involved in it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to. Let's move on here. Psalm 37 and verse 8. He says, cease from anger and forsake wrath, and fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. You can disassociate anger from yourself and from other people. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31, he says, let anger and wrath and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And the word for put away there means to basically pick it up and take it away, like off to a mountain somewhere, and set it down there where it's far away from you. And the idea in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31 is to get it away from you. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 8, he uses those same words, anger and wrath, and he says there, put it off of you. And the word there means to get it off of you, like a spider that's on you, or a snake that's on you, or dirt that's on you. Oh, I want to get it off. So in Ephesians, he uses the word for get it away from you. And in Colossians, he uses the word for get it off of you. Get away, disassociate yourself. But then also, get away from others who are angry and critical. 2 Timothy chapter 3, and we'll finish up in Proverbs, but 2 Timothy 3, verse 3. He's talking about the last days and men and their attitudes. Look what he says in verse 2. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers. Truce breakers means unreconciling, unforgiving, not willing to make peace. Truce breakers, false accusers. They love to accuse people of the worst intent. Incontinent, they have no self-control, no control over their spirit, no control over the lust of their flesh. Fierce, untamed. They say what they want to say, and they want carte blanche to do it. They don't ever want to be held accountable. They just want to be able to say what they say, ascribe all kinds of accusations to people, and that's okay. They're fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure, more than lovers of God. And as if it was James speaking, he says, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. And notice what he says, from such turn away. So disassociate yourselves, just distance yourselves from those people. And then Proverbs 22. This verse my mother made me memorize when I was a boy. Proverbs 22 and verse 24. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. You want to hang around with the person who's the critical spirit, person who's always got a problem. You want to chum around with them, you're going to get infected by that poison. You're going to get infected by that sickness. And you can think that you won't. No, I love them, they're my friends, and I won't get. Yes, you will. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go. Just let them do their own thing and stay away, lest thou learn his ways and get a snare to thy soul. You know, we learn each other's ways for good or for bad. So wise men walk with those who are wise, right? So spiritually wise, walk with those who are spiritually wise, and get away from those who are angry and critical. All right, so here's anger. Number 2, a wise person diffuses anger and strife. A wise person defers anger and strife. A wise person disciplines his spirit regarding anger and strife. And a wise person disassociates from anger and strife. We have a few minutes, maybe about 10 minutes, to go to prayer together, if you would.